said that, amidst the jubilant atmosphere and soaring expectations, there are certain challenges that need to be overcome. India continues to be home to a set of complex structural challenges that require immediate attention and swift resolution. Although progress has been made in improving levels of transparency and curtailing red tapeism, more efforts need to be directed on this front. Dealing with state and local government can really take its toll. A classic example of the macroeconomic initiatives actually not reaching the last mile is the difference and the widening gap between deflating wholesale index, which was at a minus 4.9%, and a steadily inflated consumer price index, which was at a 3.66%. So while economic benefits are there, are they really flowing into the last mile? I think that is the challenge that India needs to address, and I'm looking at Santosh and Sridhar today to actually decode this and what will it take to build brand India. When optimism fails to translate to retail level, the magic of any brand, however wonderful, is bound to diminish. It is therefore essential that our nation's aspirations are aligned with the aspirations of its 1.35 billion people. And after all this, there are people who will make the country global citizens. And it is our people who need to feel the confidence, who need to see the benefits of all these economic reforms coming their way and their quality of life improving in real world on the ground. Is the day-to-day life of an average Indian any better than what it was before this government came to power? In this afternoon session, aptly titled Brand India, Setting New Expectations, we discuss the various perspectives on these situations and also gain insights and fresh perspective from our panelists today. So I look forward to having this session, and before we move on, I just want to introduce Santosh Desai, who's the Managing Director and CEO of Futurebrands. He's been in the branding business and worked in advertising for almost 22 years. His last assignment in advertising was as the president of McCann Erickson. He is the author of bestseller Mother Pious Lady, Making Sense of Everyday India. You would have seen him and his column in Times of India every Monday. He writes on various issues of society and culture and political issues in the newspaper like Times of India, Tehelka, Media International, and many other publications. He was also the jury of the 56th National Film Awards. A postgraduate from IIM Ahmedabad, his interest lies in studying the relationship between culture and brands. And who better than Santosh to join us today for this forum? So a big round of applause for Santosh, please. V Sridhar is the Chief Creative Officer of SapientNitro. He's been in the advertising with Leo Burnett as the Asia Pacific President, Chief Creative Officer. And he's, in his role in advertising, helped build multiple brands for last 33 years and made a successful transformation to the new age digital way of building brand. And today, he's the Chief Creative Officer at SapientNitro India. Prior to Pops was recently named in the prestigious, he's popularly known as Pops, by the way, V Sridhar, popularly known as Pops. If you Google him, you'll find him as Pops and not as V Sridhar. He was recently named in the prestigious list of Hall of Fame of Asian advertising, media, and marketing leaders, past 40 years by Campaign Asia. He's won 22 Cannes Lions and over 100 international awards, and the list is really prestigious with lots of awards like D&D, New York Festivals, London International, AdFest. So a very celebrated and awarded creative professional, V Sridhar. Please join me in welcoming. Thank you. So we're going to keep the session more into a panel discussion. So before we move into question and answers, I just want to hand the mic over to Santosh and to Sridhar for a few minutes for them to give their opening perspective on what they think of Brand India as it stands today.
Thank you, Anisha. The subject of Brand India, it's as fascinating as it is a little. I'm a little wary about the subject because very often, when we talk about Brand India, we often actually there are 2 or 3 things that implicitly are always talked about. One is that Brand India becomes a site for a kind of a cheerleading site. It is both a site for cheerleading and a site for feeling depressed. So it has the manic depressive kind of a note to it, where when things go well, we are ecstatic, and when things go badly, we are down in the dumps. I suspect that when you look at a frame like the brand, and when you use, on a annual basis, India will have its ups and downs. But brand India is not such a volatile idea. Brand India is a relatively stable, long-term idea which changes with time, with evolves with time, and has been evolving. But it's important to acknowledge that two dimensions about the brand. One, that it moves over time, it evolves, and the second is that it is a complex set of variables that are interacting. Brand India cannot be reduced to India's attractiveness for foreign direct investment. When we talk about India, we are talking about, it's not just a market. It's a democracy, it's a civilization. Civilizations, to reduce civilizations to GDP numbers is to simplify beyond an acceptable level. So when we talk about brands, just as a sort of a frame, we are talking about brand India in a slightly longer term period. And therefore, interest rate cuts, etc., fascinating as they are, useful as they are, do not directly kind of impact brand India in that specific kind of a way. If you were to look at the evolution of brand India, and just to put my central kind of thesis, if you like, in a nutshell, and then maybe having a conversation, I think if you were to go back a few years and describe India as a brand, it would be this idea of it was a country that was seen to have violent extremes, a great sort of an intensity of experience. India had a surfeit of everything. In fact, some tourism study that we had done a few years ago, one of the issues with India people had was that I must go to India, but only when I'm ready for it. Because, there was the sense that, India, you can only go to India, when you really want a life-altering experience. It's too much. It's too much of everything, in a sense. That sense of there being, at one level, these great extremes, difficult but fascinating. The idea of, Galbraith's description of a functioning anarchy, India as a functioning anarchy, therefore had this resonance of these different disparate elements. When economic liberalization happened, I think what happened to brand India, both internally and externally, if you were to look at it, internally, for the first time, we felt a surge of aspiration, a belief that mobility was possible in our lifetimes. This was a radical idea. This energized people. Access to consumption, there was almost this consumption glee, where for the first time, you were allowed access to all the kind of things that you were earlier denied to. Externally, India's attractiveness is a huge market, a magnet for so many new the multinational companies that came into India. This is at the first level. With time, however, and if you come to today, there is a fundamental difference. The consumer today has got used. And therefore, the internal reality of brand India is that the first level of affluence has been experienced. Now, expectations, as the subject here says, are higher. Now, what we want is more. We are looking, therefore, at an upgraded experience of the brand, where things work better, they work more smoothly, where one has access more easily to more specific kind of ideas. Externally, too, I think one of the biggest needs in India, if you were to look at the first reform 1.0, if you were to call it that, was opening up. The need for reform 2.0, in my view, is order making. India, there needs to be a sense of order, a sense of predictability, a sense of consistency, a sense that on an everyday basis, you can access the opportunities that you see. That India is a land of opportunities, that there are a million different ideas floating around is not the dominant question. It is in the manner in which that access is available today. That is the fundamental question. And order making is not just about business, it is about regulation. It is about the lowest unit of administration. It is about the everyday experience of doing business in India and living in India. It is about the everyday experience of being a citizen in India and knowing that women, are safe in the cities, that if you go to a police station, action will be taken, that the judiciary will perform as expected. It is in the idea when countries, markets, civilizations kind of mature and ripen in today's world, the promise that they offer, along with all the wonderful things that India has to offer, has to be the promise of a certain amount of the fact that that you can make plans because there is a degree of predictability and order and things work the way that they are supposed to. It may seem at one level to be a relatively, it's actually we are looking at, small bang reforms, if you like, in a sense, rather than big bang reforms. But at this particular point, my submission is that the biggest question about branding, it's not, this government has done, I think, a wonderful job in two ways. One is in setting out a vision. Historically, we have coped with poverty, never planned for prosperity. And I think this is a government, for the first time, that is planning for prosperity. That its intention, that is seriously invested in growth and the progress of India cannot be doubted by even its worst detractors. The fact that there is that intention. The question is, how does that intention get translated? And that's where the challenge is the truly tough one. It isn't today, I don't think Brand India is about communicating or slogans those are not the question. The Brand India's central questions are questions of creating a sense of order, in my view. And I'll build upon this as we go forward, but that essentially was I thought I would begin with, those remarks.
Thank you, Santosh. Thank you. Before we get down to the next, I have a related question straight away that's just bubbling in my head, but before that, I'll just hand it over to Sridhar.
Yeah, I think one of the fundamental things when you actually talk about brand, brands are never made by manufacturers. Brands are always made by people. It is people who embrace a product and then get something, a higher order emotional attachment with that, then it becomes a brand. Now the question is, that's how traditionally all the brands are built. If there is no emotional attachment to any product, it will never become a brand. You need to have an emotional affinity towards a brand. Now when we talk about the brand, there are two things, what do we think about ourselves? What does the world think about us? What is that which we can do? What is that which the world wants us to do? And fundamental difference between a product and a brand is most of the brands serve a purpose in people's life. Because they serve a purpose in people's life, they find a place in their life. And if that is so, nations are absolutely no different. If India were to find a purpose in the global economy or in the global stage, it must find a purpose in every country's life. Then India will play a role in all of them. So that, I think, is the fundamental thing. If you were to go back, maybe till 80s, I remember very vividly when I was growing up, all these cartoons, even at Time magazine, that Indian population are like rodents eating away the grains of the entire world produced grain. We were a burden to the entire world. They were nightmares. Every child is being taught that you will not have any food grains left because these guys come and then eat everything. We were a burden to the world. And look what had happened in 30 years. We are not a burden to the world. We are an asset. On what basis? We are an asset because of people. The same people who were burdened, today the same people are assets of the nation. And then we go, and every one of us go and then tout that, we are 1.25 billion with great pride. At one time, we used to actually shy away, answering a question from the world that what is your population? We used to feel very sorry about it. That is our strength. If you were, maybe that was our weakness also. Most of the brands, anything can only be built on your strength, not on your weaknesses. We have many weaknesses which we cannot change. And then what we can build on is our strength, which is people. To me, the most important thing is how can this 1.2 billion people play a role in rest of 7.5 billion people or 6.5, whatever. So if you find a purpose which you can serve in this world, you will have a much stronger role to play. Look at one little thing, out of all the tech talk which our Prime Minister had everywhere. I think one which stuck in everybody's head is when he spoke about good terrorism versus bad terrorism. There is nothing called good terrorism, bad terrorism. Suddenly, India has been elevated into a thought leadership, making world think about terrorism in a very different way. So I think, these are the things, which will make India, we have always been a knowledge seeking country. Apart from Make in India, I think, the biggest strength of our people, our talent, is their ability to think much ahead. Look at all the people whom we are so proud of, those two CEOs who are sitting at San Jose. One is Pichaya and the other one is Nadella. Both of them are from India. I think when people think in India and then Make in India will be much stronger brand, then the world thinks for us and we import that, make here and give it back to the world, we become a supplier. I think the strength lies in our ability of our people thinking and then making. The more Volkswagen cars we make in India and then sell it to Germany, we are not going to become big shots. We will be just one more manufacturing unit. If you were to think of Teslas in India and then sell it to the world, then you are actually taking, giving world something. So what is that which India can give the world? And if you were to discover, it's a process. Nobody can ever discover the purpose. At times people spend all their lifetime, still don't find a purpose. 60 years we have been searching. And I think in a long run, we need to find a purpose, what purpose we can serve in the lives of 6.5 billion people who are there and who are looking at this largest democracy in the world, this knowledge economy, this vivid technologically ahead country. What is that which we can do to the world? I think that's a fundamental question which we need to probe and then ask.
So there is some bit of contradiction that just emerges as I hear Santosh and Pop speak. Santosh is telling us that the vision for the country, at least the new government has set, there is a very, very clear vision. The intention to grow and, go for affluence and growth cannot be doubted. However, there's a big gap between intention and action. What really needs to happen on ground and translate that into what will make Brand India today. Whereas what Pop seemed to be saying is, we still need to find a purpose for Brand India. For me, a vision and a purpose are interconnected. From the vision, the purpose flows. So is it true, Santosh, that we found the vision, but we are still struggling to find our purpose? And what will help us shape and define the brand, Brand India's purpose? Are they two different things? Are we still at variance on that one?
Yeah, I guess, the purpose that Pops is talking about is a kind of a deeper purpose, I think when we talk about the vision of this government, I think what you are seeing is, every government to a certain extent, while it can look, to a much longer time frame, but it has a time frame, it has a tenure. And it's important for it to define a vision in a way that is deliverable. Because for it to define it in an abstract future, which is outside its control, has it doesn't, beyond a point that doesn't, that may not be an immediate priority. So I would agree that if you were to look at a longer term purpose, I think if you were to ask the question that I think in a sense he's proposing, can the world expect from India? What will India, if India did not exist, what would the world lose? What value does India add to the world? I think that's a large, and the answers there would be somewhat abstract and philosophical. Answer, for instance, could be India will find new ways of solving old problems. It will be able, instead of looking at the world as binaries and problems being trade-offs, India will give you, but my current concern on that front is that I think there is the long-term question of purpose which we need to address, but there is a more perhaps pressing question, which is about what, in a more finite time frame, what are the imperatives for brand India? Absolutely. And I think those were the kind of questions that I was sort of talking about.
So, Pops, coming to you, I mean, for every Satya Nadella and Sundar Pichai, there are 4,000 startups, maximum number of entrepreneurial startups in India, in the last 12 months, if you look at data. I mean, these have just started, economy has just started turning around. Each of these, if they start doing, new ways of solving the same world's problems, and some of these entrepreneurs projects start becoming successful, I think this whole answer of that, that our thinking is getting outsourced and we are actually proposing making in India and thinking outside. I seem to be a little, at a dissonance with that, because there are, when you look at the new generation, when you look at the entrepreneurs, when you look at the numbers that are coming there, there is every evidence that Indians today are thinking and creating for India. In their thinking process, they are not just replicating projects, what is happening abroad. If you look at the startups, some of the new startups that are coming are what the world hasn't thought of as yet. So we have to, do we need to give them time, to start growing, to start delivering, to convert into something tangible, for them to start seeing, the relevance of what a Google is today or what a Microsoft is. I think there could be, out of these 4,000, even if you have a 0.1% that has the potential of turning into a Google or a Facebook, what they did first, I think we are on the right path.
Yeah, we are. There are only two people whom we celebrate in Silicon Valley. There is a workplace, the workforce of more than 100,000 people who are working there. I think that the bigger issue is, even to have a strategy for today, you need to have a goal post. If you don't have a goal post, you don't know where to run. I think the higher order purpose is not just philosophical. Actually, it guides you the strategies which you make. If you say that, hypothetically, if you say that people are my interest, imagine, how we all talk about jugaad, correct? There was a time, when our parents used to talk about cheap and best, we used to laugh at them, saying that how can best be cheap? How can cheap be best? And now in this day and age, with which emerging of India and China, world is learning how to make things cheaper and better quality. Correct? There are a lot of things, which actually catapult and then become much bigger than what they are if we were to actually see our strength. I mean, when we talk about 1.25 billion people, it's all people. So many people are there. Just imagine, none of our numbers when we actually talk about go beyond 1,000, 5,000, 10,000, 100,000. How can this amount of people can transform? I'll give you an example of some study which we were doing some time back, thrown up one very interesting concept of migrant population. This we were doing for a telecom company, and lot of these youngsters who are migrating from smaller towns, smaller villages, and then coming to larger towns to really find a livelihood. And then when they come here, only weapon which they don't have an address, they don't have people, they don't have anyone. Only thing which they have is an ambition and a cell phone in their hand. And then they find a livelihood. And then that became a window to them. Now imagine the kind of inspiration Narayan Murthy has provided to the entire country when he came back from there and then set up Infosys. And then the same kind of transformation is going to happen when these little boys and girls who are coming, migrating from smaller towns, coming here, and then seeing the dream and ambition, experiencing, and then go back and then transform their own villages. I don't believe that government is going to change the face of the country. I don't believe that huge corporations are going to change the country. It is the small entrepreneurs who are going to change the way we live. I think the small entrepreneurs, there's so much of talent, even that 5 T's. The first one is always talent. When we focus on people, then we realize that what bunch of talent which we are sitting, it's just which you need to nurture. 10 IITs for a country of 1.25 billion, 16 IITs, correct? So it is, the numbers are too small. That should be our first priority, is to, if you ask me, maybe leverage the talent which we have, understand the talent which we have, then everything else will fall in place. Of course, I'm not saying that, Google should not come and then invest $3 billion here. Of course, it needs to happen. But it also needs to happen from the other side. When the both worlds meet is when the real India will emerge.
Thank you. I think that is very well said, Pops. Santosh, what will it take for the government? There is something called the country brand, and there is something called, what the country needs to do for the people to realize their potential. What is it that India needs to do, the government needs to do at their level for this 1.35 billion, the population that Pops is talking about, for them to realize their potential, for them to make another Google or Facebook? What's government's role in this and how they should be going about it?
I mean, one is certainly, I think there are some actions that are already, have been initiated. I think the notion of Swachh Bharat, for instance, I think is as an initiative, the idea of, again, creating a certain basic level of sanitation, a certain uniformity that you are able to create across the country of a certain experience of life, which everyone must have a right to. I think the idea of creating that consciousness and actually putting serious money behind it, serious effort behind it, I think is the kind of work that is required. Because I think what is required are ground level transformational projects. And these ground level transformational projects, even as the Swachh Bharat experience shows, requires, it's not just about, it helps when the government is serious, it helps when there is a serious amount of money backing it, and there is actually a serious, of intent, but it still requires changes that need soft infrastructure to exist. And I think the building of social infrastructure and softer infrastructure, I think, is one of the key areas in any government. If we are talking about realizing the potential, see, I agree with Pops that, I always believe that when we talk about education in India, we talk about the IITs and IIMs. But the real story of education in India is not the IITs and IIMs. The real story of education is you go to any small town, you will see these little computer institutes, little English-speaking institutes, little air hostess academies. They are holes in the wall. They do not make any pretensions to great education. But they reveal an energy of people determined to improve themselves. In spite of the fact that, the public facility in this case is not available. This determination, I think, is the real energy. And to harness this, the investment in human capability, there is investment that is being made in the areas of skilling. I think that has been a significant initiative. But I think education is I think, one of the areas that is where, and the other, as I would go back to saying, I think it is the unglamorous work of administrative reform, the unglamorous work of things like police reform, the fact that the judiciary, it takes the number of years it does, it's a nightmare for the common person to get entangled with the law. If you do not change, look at the experience of any developed country. The fundamental difference is the ease of navigating everyday life. Without providing this and without focus